Hello and welcome to the Culture Reset podcast. I'm Caroline Kenyon.
And I'm Juliette Kumar. Hello.
And this podcast is all about taking stock of your workplace culture. What does it feel like to work in your organisation? How do staff interact with each other and with the people they deal with? Do they go to work with a spring in their step or with a sense of dread? It's not easy to reset culture, but we found some special individuals who are doing just that, and we want to know how they're doing it.
In this episode, we're joined by Jacqui McKinlay, Chief Operating Officer at Liverpool City Council, which many listeners will know has been through turbulent times in recent years, which can't have been easy for staff or for the local citizens. Jacqui, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so as you say, Jacqui McKinlay, working for Liverpool City Council as their Chief Operating Officer for the last 3 years.
Great. So tell us a little bit about your background. You're from Liverpool, aren't you?
I am, as the accent gives that away. So, but actually this is the first time I've worked in Liverpool. So born and bred, a Notre Dame girl for those who know our diocese schools out there. But then left for university, and my first job was in the civil service. So joined as a graduate trainee, 3 years in the civil service, which is a brilliant grounding, but wasn't really for me as a career from there. But then specialised in communications and spent quite a long time in communications, which is a great way to get into lots of different sectors. A great way to kind of have corporate roles and see how culture operates across that. So I worked in health, in the Health at Work at the NHS programme, then moved on to sport in the setting up of the Sports Institute, following on some of our failings in sport at the Olympics, and then moved to local government. That was in Staffordshire. Spent 13 years there, one of those jobs where you go, I'm only going to go for 2 years, and then 2 more babies later, and, kind of got to a senior level there. And then had a choice really as to do I stay in local government, and took the opportunity to become Chief Exec of the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, which is a national charity and organisation primarily working with local government. But really was, fortunate there, worked with Bob Kerslake, Lord Bob Kerslake, who, excellent person from a public sector point of view, and had the chance there to work with lots of different organisations. So we did the governance review of Kensington and Chelsea Council after Grenfell, some really kind of difficult, challenging things there from a governance and a scrutiny and a culture point of view.
Gosh, really interesting and varied. Yeah,
it is. And then came to Liverpool.
And
so a whole kind of circuit, and, and all from communications, but obviously kind of specialising and broadening that out as I went.
So you've really got a great bird's eye view of the entire system, haven't you, having touched those different organisations?
And I think that's been a real, you kind of, I say, communications get you into that, but it's also been a real advantage, I think, to see different setups and, see different parts of a system, but also the civil service, national government, a non-departmental body, and a charity as well, and now back to local government. And I think that gives you that insight, particularly coming back to local government, where you engage with every, from business to communities to, voluntary community sector partners. So I think that's been a real advantage as well.
That sounds fantastic, yeah. So you joined Liverpool City Council in January 22. What was happening at that point?
Well, we, as you said, turbulent times is a good description for Liverpool. So we had what we call governance failures, significant governance failures, which, really came down to the arrest of the mayor and some senior directors at the time. And that led to a best value review, which is the government's way of coming in really just to see, what intervention is needed. And as a result of that report, they put in intervention really in commissioners. So we had 4 governing commissioners who arrived at that time for a 3-year period. A year later, that became 5 commissioners because of some of the financial failings. So, I think we were the first core city, first big city to have that type of intervention. And it also is a lot of intervention comes on the back of service or financial failures. So again, it wasn't great for the city that it was this type of failure as well. But I think, you could say it was about an act of individuals or alleged act of individuals, but I think what we know, particularly from a culture point of view, is those sorts of failures don't really happen in organisations that are functioning well. that have got a positive culture, that have got strong governance, that have got strong leadership. And I think that was really, when I arrived, some of that realisation, which was actually this is a whole council and probably a whole system change that we needed, rather than just saying, oh, you know, how did this happen because of a couple of people or a couple of departments? And I was one of the first senior appointments, both from the commissioners and the council, to come in at that leadership level, and with the responsibility for improvement and transformation. So, you know, quite a big task.
Yeah, and I bet that had a massive impact.
Not all by myself there. It sounded a bit like Superwoman coming in. But it was part of an overall thing.
Let's leave it as Superwoman.
Yeah, I'll take that.
We like that. What did it feel like at the time? What were people working there saying to you about how it felt being part of that organisation? It was so public. It was all out there in the media all the time. The photographs of the commissioners arriving at the town hall. It was all very public. What must it have felt like to be a member of staff?
Do you know, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? And I suppose if I start with what it felt like, what people were saying to me, which was, you know, why and what's it like when you go in there, and you know, people can't go around with their hair on fire and crying all the time. You know, human nature doesn't allow you to do that. You have to get on with your job. So there was a real sense of, during whatever has happened, Liverpool City Council has opened the doors, turned the lights on and delivered services. You know, that has happened every day, and that's a real testament. And every, you know, the Max Calla Best Value report, the commissioners have always said how great the staff are, how hardworking, how committed, how loyal, how passionate. And I think that was probably one of the things when you came in, and it, you know, I know it's a bit of a cliche to say, but it is the warmest kind of great, you know, great energy, great. But as you said, if you then said to people, are you proud to work here? Do you feel valued? Do you feel listened to? All the standard staff survey questions, they didn't. But when you engaged with them and said, are you trying... So when we did our first staff survey for the first time in at least 10 years, if not longer, because it hadn't happened, people were talking positively about their teams, positively about their managers, positively about their work. And then as you asked their views about the organisation and all of that, they weren't happy. So it's not to say people weren't affected, they really were. And particularly those teams that were directly involved, you know, morale is low. But it didn't really manifest with people walking around feeling miserable. It was more when you tried to deliver change, really difficult. And for an organisation that hadn't actually experienced a lot of change and transformation, there was a real fatigue in some of the teams. And you were thinking, well, we haven't really changed anything yet, but because of everything that you said. And I think people just wanted to be proud for working for the council again, you know, as a basic.
I suppose for them, there was an element of trust that needed to be rebuilt in the senior leadership team after what had happened. I know that I visited Finland earlier this year, and they're reported to be the happiest country in Europe. They've done surveys, and what they found is that they're happy because they have a high level of trust in their government. So there's a correlation between feeling well, feeling happy, and how trustful you can be of the people that are governing you or looking after you.
Yeah, and I think there's that, you know, it's a bit like the social contract we have between public services. There's a real, the contract between an employer and employee, isn't it, which is, we'll pay you, we'll, you know, create conditions that are warm enough and comfortable and you can do your job. But actually, it goes much further than that. We will be an organisation that has integrity, that's transparent, that will talk to you, will listen to you, will deliver when we say, and that had been broken. And you know, genuinely, and we're not there at all, but you know, we've still got a way to go, but it's taken 3 years to get there. Literally 3 years to get there. You know, we all know that trust and reputation is kind of hard fought and easily lost.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're in that space still, I think, in some parts.
Communications comes into this, so when you start to tell us about what you did, I mean, communications must have been absolutely vital, getting that right, getting the right messaging right, but also the right tone of voice and the transparency and being honest. Like you're being honest with us now in this podcast, which is fantastic. We're going to learn a lot from you about what it was like and what it felt like. But that's all part of that openness and transparency, isn't it? Which is, you have to do that before you can move on and make things better to get the trust.
You do, but it's also, you can't just have that. And again, we've got excellent communication in our organisation, as lots of others do. And, I haven't worked in communications for a long time. You get lots of people who say, can you make that better? And can you get people to trust us? And you're thinking, well, no. I can communicate really clearly. I can get the messages out. But if it's not backed up by people's experience of what it feels like, and that's the real difficulty, especially with having commissioners in, the biggest challenge they set us was, you need to improve the culture of Liverpool City Council. You think, right, well, we've got nearly 5,000 staff. We operate across over 80 locations. We deliver to 500,000 people. We've got hundreds of services. So when people then say, well, what is culture and what does that mean and how do you... So we've had to take quite a scientific approach to this, as well as the hearts and minds bit. And that's absolutely where communications comes in, and having the integrity of leadership that we've got in the organisation now has made the communications a lot easier, because that people's experience is backed up then. So, we've got a leader of the City Council and a cabinet of the City Council that want to be known as the most professional cabinet in the land. And they then back that up by their experience. They're open, they're transparent, they take considered decisions, they put the hard work into that. And that's what staff then see and experience.
So the behaviours
It's
follow.
authentic.
All of
It
the
has to be
behaviours
authentic.
follow. We're making really difficult decisions, as every public sector organisation, has to handle all the financial challenges. But we're trying to do that in a very open way, where people can see the evidence. And we're not getting it right all the time, but that approach is there. And then from a culture change point of view, because we're doing a massive transformation as well, it's hitting everything from home to school transport to adult social care to children's. We brought that same science and methodology of transformation to culture, where we had a transformation culture programme, chaired by the Deputy Chief Exec, reporting into a transformation board. And I know all of this is the dull bit of it, but we then had projects ranging from everything from agile working through to performance appraise, all the detailed stuff that goes into this is some of the basics that you need in order to get things right. And the other bit we did quite early on was around asking people what was getting in the way of doing their jobs, which we all know. You can change the culture in any way, but if that printer doesn't work, or you can't log on easily, and I think a little bit in reaction to what had happened, some of our processes had gone quite risk adverse. So, trying to get decisions done had often been pushed up, or we'd made it quite hard to get, and public sector does anyway, but, we'd made it even harder. So again, we looked at our procurement decisions, our recruitment decisions, anything where we can say, let's try and make it now easier, and without calling that culture change. Again, that just helped with, let's create the conditions where you can do the best job possible. And I think that's about kind of, allowing people then to be their best.
So it was the processes you were looking at first of all, the infrastructure to enable the culture to change. That was all what you might call the boring stuff, but very, very necessary. But you overlaid that with other things as well. So tell us about what else you did.
So we did a lot around equality, diversity and inclusion. And again, I think as Liverpool had become quite insular in its approach, we hadn't really invested the time that we needed. So again, brilliant things happen, but they tend to be quite individual-led or quite service-led. And again, we found people were saying to us, doesn't feel like it's as inclusive as it could be. We've got a big issue that our workforce doesn't reflect the communities that we serve. And when we also look internally, we don't tend to attract people from diverse communities. We don't tend to promote people. So we did a lot of work around our staff networks, around recruitment, and we opened the doors wide enough. But also a lot of work about trying to make it a kind of back to being a normal, fun place. And we also had to look at the, you could call it the softer side of culture change, which was really making sure that we, you know, as well as the trustworthy voice and the transparent voice, we had to get a celebratory voice back in, because I say people were still doing brilliant things, and actually at the same time we were still winning awards, and we were still, you know, doing mad things around putting bins in, you know, underground, and great innovative things that the city is brilliant at, isn't it? I mean, at the peak of all of this, which I'm sure we can come back to, we delivered Eurovision.
Of course.
You know,
that was
while
fantastic.
which was literally the most fabulous thing that you could do. So as well as getting the basics right, doing the processes, putting in place a communications infrastructure of, you know, regular manager briefings, getting people together in conferences, allowing people again to do all that kind of, you know, training and development and all the energy stuff. We just needed then to start to do right, let's have staff awards. Let's kind of, you know, start to celebrate long service. And we would have been doing that, but not in a way that it's regular and we're able to, you know, be proud of that. And that takes a confidence sometimes, again, back to where the organisation was, to start to say, well, actually, we will apply for national awards, and we will, you know, recognise the value of that is for the staff who get the recognition, and we can celebrate it. And there was a little bit in that in Eurovision as well, which was, you can't represent and serve a fabulous city like this and then start to close it down when you get an opportunity like Eurovision. And literally we were like, you know, can we afford the world's biggest party while all of this is going on? But the government were very helpful in that. But I think that was part of getting our confidence back, and I think showing the city that, you know, we were there and we were still able to do the things which we're great at, which is, you know, have
so
a great
fantastic
party.
for Liverpool, wasn't it?
It was a morale boost for everybody.
Showcase of what is possible and the culture we can create, and the vibrancy of the city. It was fantastic.
And there was some research, mental health research, done about the mood of the city during and after Eurovision, and how it sustained after Eurovision, which is, it's brilliant.
Yeah, and that's what we do brilliantly, isn't it? And I think it's trying to say maintain that energy, maintain what we're really good at, and now also start to look at what other benefits does it bring to the city if you've got a well-run, competent, confident council. And I think, you know, from a partner point of view and from a government point of view, that's really important, and that brings the benefit.
Yeah,
to
you have to show you're a safe pair of hands for these big events, don't you? And that you're going to deliver them well, and to budget and to time and all that.
Yeah. And I think it's also that, you know, we also want to be seen as that safe pair of hands for housing, for health, for regeneration, you know, which we've done a lot around regeneration. So it's also doing, as well as the culture stuff, which is absolutely brilliant, it's now recognising that, you know, we now need to be a city and a city council that really brings the real benefits to the residents. And that's that next challenge for the city. Hopefully staff are starting to feel a difference, definitely becoming a stronger organisation. The residents aren't yet seeing the benefits, and that's that focus which will make it a success. If not, we won't have succeeded.
In not very easy times in terms of budget and finances, but that's not the topic of this podcast. But yeah, that's an amazing challenge to move to, isn't it? And to see an impact there. If we look back at what you've been doing then over the last, or you personally, 2 years, but what's been happening over the last 3 years, what have been the most impactful changes, do you think, in terms of workplace culture?
I think you can't underestimate the impact of leadership. Really, and I know what I do on a day-to-day basis will only ever impact or the chief executive, but you know, my experience in Liverpool and in my previous role, you could usually tell quite quickly that if the leadership didn't get it, didn't buy into it, weren't willing to do the behaviours, do the follow-through, then you only ever got so far in culture change. And it's such a shame because, you know, not every organisation does have it. But I think what we had was, you know, really kind of committed leaders who wanted to work with the commissioners to do what we needed to do, but then really committed leaders who wanted to kind of, you know, see through the change and support it and make some of the difficult decisions as you go. So I think that has probably been one of the most impactful things that we had to do early on. What we also were able to do, which, you know, is probably not something you'd ever want to do, but was bring in a whole kind of new senior leadership cohort. So over a period of about 18 months, I think we had about 32 new senior leaders who joined the organisation, which, is a challenge from an HR point of view. And at the beginning, it was a cultural challenge because not everyone wanted to come and work for Liverpool City Council. So we had to kind of work really hard to get people to come and work. But that, and also within that 31 were some brilliant internal appointments as well. So it wasn't all external, it was internal as well. But what we were able to do with that from a culture change point of view was really embed how we wanted people to work. Really embed the fact that, this is how we behave, this is how we operate, we want to be external focused, we don't all want to be all of that kind of really good stuff.
Value-driven stuff.
Value-driven, able to recruit people who, had a passion for the city, passion for public service, passion for, working with the brilliant staff that we had. So that really helped kind of tip that bit. And I think, back to staff trusting, a lot of them had, me personally had worked with, I think it was, 4 or 5 finance directors and, 3 chief exec, so everyone had that instability in the organisation. So not only the values, but it then set a stability. These people were here, hopefully for at least 2 or 3 years, hopefully longer than that. And I think that really helped because what people were then able to do was have someone that they trusted, would listen to them around what needed to be improved. And that really tipped that balance really, I think, into, where we're hopefully heading to now.
Gosh. Yeah. Lots of work in the last 3 years. I'm getting the sense that it's been.
That's why I'm a bit tired.
Yeah. Well, I was about to ask you that. Really, it's how's it been for you personally? I mean, how do you look after yourself? Because it sounds like you're a very busy woman.
I think there's something about. I think there's something about a particular job at a particular point in your career, and. For me to come back to Liverpool, to kind of have that personal connection, have the be here back doing this, meant that it has felt, it sounds a bit cliche said, but it has been a real privilege to do that. And it is the sort of job as well. I mean, I say we've had Eurovision, we do lots of cultural stuff. It's kind of a brilliantly exciting place to be as well, and you get the benefits of that. And particularly, I love doing a corporate job because you can be very nosy and you're involved in lots of different things. But, I'd done lots of other jobs before and then came to this. It was quite whilst it was really challenging, we did have commissioners, we did have a lot of support in place. I was 3 other directors joined at that time and others came in. So it's never felt like you're just there doing it alone. And I think, you've done change in other places where you're at the front and then you're shouting at everyone. It has felt like there's been a real goodwill within the region, within partners nationally for us to succeed. So that has helped. I also think, there is something about... I think there's something which is, if you've got a family and there is that balance, isn't it? No one cares, do they, what job you do? And so, being able to then go home and relax and all of that. But I suppose realistically as well, you do also surrender a bit of your life for a period of time, don't you? And then reap the benefits when you can bring in a brilliant team and see the benefits there.
You must have been living and breathing it at the time.
Yeah. And it was, particularly the first, I'd say 6 months or so, there was so much discovery of things because, I say loads of really great people, but when you came into it, you thought, am I the only person that's seeing some of this? And I wasn't at all. But when you come into an organisation that's in that amount of flux, even some of the basics and putting them back in place felt quite revolutionary. And I think one of the interesting things we've got now is sometimes going from that level of instability up to being improved. Whilst it's really hard work, it is relatively easy sometimes. No, it's not easy, but you are putting the basics in place.
Because it's been a low starting point.
It's been a low starting point, and you
kind of quick wins, putting things in,
putting the basics in.
Yeah. And the more complex stuff takes more thinking and more knotty problem solving.
And also, we've invested quite a lot in transformation, and we have to spend quite a lot of time saying to our transformation people who thought they're going to arrive to an really exciting kind of world, and it is exciting, but it's also a hard grind. Making change happen is a hard grind, and I think sometimes the early wins give people loads of energy, and we've seen that with our senior staff and some of our change. Now we're at the point where you have to go from kind of improved to good, hopefully, and then good to great, and great to excellent, and culturally that's the really tough bit. So so it's been exciting. It's gone fast as well. So that's helped.
What do you think now, looking back on it? How does it feel looking back on it? What's to get to this point?
I think when we had the powers transferred back to us in the summer, that was a really, we didn't publicly, we know it's a milestone. It was never about getting rid of the commissioners. It was always about delivering a council that we want the city to be proud of. So, that is absolutely our aim. But those sorts of milestones of getting powers back, which we had done previously, getting our staff survey results, this year, where they were just showed that tick up, and
so you saw some evidence.
Just start to see some evidence, which you could feel anecdotally. You could feel like things were changing, but we are seeing some of that evidence. So I think that has helped, knowing that we're on the right track. But there is still loads to do. And I think, yourselves, if you're that kind of minded, you kind of spend about 2 minutes thinking about what's gone well, and then you move on to what the next challenge is, or what the next problem is to be solved.
You don't put your cape away just yet then, Superwoman.
So we have to finish now, but just one last question. If you had to give just one piece of advice to someone in a similar situation to you 3 years ago, what would it be?
Am I only allowed one?
Say it quickly.
You can,
throw another one.
So from a culture change point of view, I'm going to give the dull answer, and then I'll give it. You have to do this as a project and a programme. You cannot just set out and think you're going to change the culture by power of will and perseverance and just good communication. If you don't go for root and branch of every aspect of it, and I say, put the resource in, put the programme in, make sure you cover everything from staff engagement to, all of the different interventions and projects that make that change happen, and be able to measure that impact, it won't happen. And I think that would be my big bit of advice, is if you lead in this sort of culture change, make sure you take that approach to it. I think the other bit, which is less dull, is I think believe in your staff that will make the change happen as well.
Ted Lasso.
But it,
just believe,
just believe that. And I say we were really lucky to have an normal bell curve of where people might be up to on performance and engagement, but genuinely, a group of kind of staff who want to do a good job. And as we do everything from register births to, every single job. But I think just believe that if you empower staff, trust them, make them get to a place where they feel valued, feel engaged, will want to recommend people to come and work for us, that will tip that balance. And I think that's what hopefully we're starting to see now.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that great? I love an optimistic end. That's not quite right thing to say, is it? Not optimistic because it's fact. I love to hear a story that's got a happy ending. I know it's not an ending, Jacqui, but
it's a journey.
You've come a long way.
You might make me nervous that we're going to have something terrible.
Believe.
We believe.
Well, it's brilliant to hear. Thank you so much. Jacqui McKinlay, Chief Operating Officer of Liverpool City Council. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please do follow us on your usual podcast channel so you don't miss a single conversation. And until next time, it's goodbye from me, Caroline Kenyon.
And from me, Juliette Kumar.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.